In the Duelist Kingdom arc, one of the most iconic showdowns is between Joey Wheeler, the up-and-coming underdog duelist, and Bandit Keith, the conniving cheat with a big chip on his shoulder. True, this isn't the first jerk he's had to square up against, but Bandit Keith is on a whole other level. His opponents thus far have been tricky and sneaky, some have even cheated, but Keith had a darkness in his heart that far surpassed the petty escapades of previous contestants, and Joey wouldn't have the help of any of his friends while in the game. One of Keith's advantages was his vast array of machine monsters, who aren't just strong, but in the wild and wacky rules of Yu-Gi-Oh's early days, had armor that made them immune to all magical attacks. Easy enough to avoid when out in the open, but gets a little trickier when you can deploy it at will. And so, Metalmorph was born. And while its impact on the story of Yu-Gi-Oh was minimal, it somehow stuck to the zeitgeist of the player base with surprising strength. In practice, it was a pretty nifty card, not competitively strong mind you, but stealing half of your opponent's attack points made most monsters on the offensive unbeatable. Hello everyone, GoldenNova here, and thanks to my patrons' requests and some pretty cool new support, we'll be covering all of those cards right here. So get ready to raid those heavy metals, cause it's time for Metalmorph Explained. Real quick before we get started, one of the many themes to cover out of Doom of Dimensions is DDs, and I need your help to cover it. Ever since I started working on this channel full-time, my Patreon has had a goal where if I get 200 patrons, I would cover the theme, and now seems like as good a time as any to accomplish that goal. If you have $1 to spare each month, please consider supporting me over on Patreon or right here as a YouTube member. I'll be counting both, because it really does make a huge difference here. Not only do higher tiers get you early access to videos and to parts of my Discord, it also means I'd have more money to hire editors, which would mean I'd have more time to do other outrageous things. It's no exaggeration that if just 1% of my audience gave a single dollar, I'd never have to worry about a video underperforming ever again, and I could invest in a lot more lore content. Turns out that stuff is pretty risky. Thank you all for your time, and now, let's get to the explaining. So, what's the deal with Metalmorph? Well, that's a funny story. To tell it effectively, we are going to have to eschew our normal strategy of going from monsters, then spells to traps. Instead, we're going to have to take a look at the earliest forms of Metalmorph so that we can get context for the later ones. And no understanding would be complete without Metalmorph itself, a normal trap card that has you targeting a face-up monster on the field. You equip Metalmorph to that target and it gains 300 attack and defense. And if it attacks, it gains attack equal to half of the attack target during damage calculation only. So as long as you were at least half as strong as what you wanted to fight, you could run over it. Heck, it even gave you a 300-point boost to help you get there. This was a universally useful card, so if you were doing some playground Yu-Gi-Oh and needed a card to fill up your deck, this was a pretty fantastic option. And we'd get to see just how powerful an effect like this can be in practice, because a powered up version of this effect would be part of the reason why Borrelsaur Dragon was as popular as it was when it came to ending games. But if it was just that, I don't think this card would be as iconic as it is today. During its premiere duel, Metalmorph was used twice, making two unique monsters. Zoa would be transformed into Metal Zoa, and Red Eyes Black Dragon would become Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon, both of whom you can summon by attributing the appropriate monsters that's equipped with Metalmorph, and you can do so right out of your deck. Yeah, they got those inherent summons from the deck that some of the Charmer monsters can do. But they're effectively just giant vanilla monsters, which are arguably worse than their base forms because at least then you still get the Metalmorph attack gaining effect. In the card game, the metal versions just have the appropriate amount of attack and defense they would get if they used the anime version of Metalmorph, because that gives 400 attack and defense, ooh. But that's not where it stops. We'd actually revisit Metalmorph in a retrain Rare Metalmorph, a continuous trap card that you activated by targeting a machine-type monster on the field. It gains 500 attack, and once it negates a spell effect that targets that monster, but if that monster leaves the field, destroy this card. This was a pretty fun defensive option. The negate happens on resolution, so you can flip this in response to targeted spell interaction, and you got a 500-point attack boost for as long as you kept Rare Metalmorph around. But it lost a lot of its general utility. Now, this only worked with machine monsters specifically, even though the original mission statement was for Metalmorph to transform things into lifeless robotic husks. However, it does reclaim the idea that machine monsters resist spells with their magic-resistant armor, though this only protects against a single targeted instance, so Rare Metalmorph, even in its upgraded form, is rarely helpful. That's where Metalmorph was at for a long time, up until the release of the October 2024 core set Rage of the Abyss, which contained a whole slew of cards that represent the next generation of getting chromed. And at the risk of making this card order even messier than it already is, we do need to start with the trap card the whole pile is built around, Max Metalmorph, a normal trap card that has you attributing a face-up monster, and it special summons a monster that can't be normal summoned or set that mentions Max Metalmorph from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Then, you can equip this card to it with the following effect. The equipped monster gains 400 attack and defense, it can't be destroyed by spell or monster effects, also your opponent cannot target it with monster effects or spell cards or effects. Now, this card is a much more faithful adaptation of the anime version. It's got the spell protection, it stops all monsters outright, so I guess they've got a bit of magic there, and it's even got the full 400 point boost as opposed to that dinky 300 one we got saddled with in the original printing. That being said, at present, there are only 3 targets for this effect, so it's a good thing that they're kind of bonkers. On top of their printed effects and stat lines, they'll be getting even bigger and ward off a ton of interaction, but we still aren't as universally usable as the original Metalmorph was. See, what Max Metalmorph doesn't tell you is that you'll have to tribute a level 5 or higher monster, and you'll only be summoning one of your payoffs based on the type of monster that was tributed, and we currently only have targets for Fiend, Dragon, and Warrior type monsters. Now, this means you have a pretty nifty addition to any deck running those types, but does make it difficult to make a dedicated deck for it, though to be honest, I don't think they'd want to be one, even if they could. Probably because it would be too much work. That's some maximum effort right there. Next up, we have our Metalmorph adjacent monsters. These do some fun things to help get all of our pieces into rotation, and the first one is Metal Illusionist, which despite the name is a level 1 light spellcaster monster, though that's to be expected because this is a riff on one of Joey's classic monsters, Copycat, who was the card that stole Bandit Keith's Metalmorph so that he could give it to Red Eye's Black Dragon. Look, you can even see the original art for Metalmorph in the mirror. During your opponent's turn only, this card's level is increased by 4, and if this card is normal or special summoned, you can set a Metalmorph trap card from your deck. Then, if Max Metalmorph is in your grave, you can draw a card. Also, you can declare one other monster type, and this card becomes that type until the end of your opponent's turn. Which means you've been double fooled. It actually can be an illusion monster. But yeah, this is integral to any deck looking to splash in the Metalmorphs, especially if you want to play more than one of the bosses. Not only does this get Max Metalmorph onto your field, it becomes whatever type you need to summon whatever you need. They even give you the levels you need just in case. How sweet. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to reckon with the fact that Metal Illusionist's hat looks like it has cat ears now. Zoa the Fiendish Beast is a level 7 Dark Fiend monster with 2600 attack and 1900 defense, and if your opponent controls a monster, you can normal summon this card without tributing. If this card is in your hand, you can also special summon it in defense position. Then if Max Metalmorph is not in your grave, your opponent can special summon a monster from their hand. And during your main phase, you can set a Metalmorph trap card from your deck. Ah, the creature that started it all. The fact that we have another monster that gets us Metalmorph cards is pretty chill, but unfortunately the card being very flavorful means it comes with a massive drawback. Like we said in the beginning, Bandit Keith summons Zoa as bait to get Joey to attack him, the idea being that it's not going to be coated in a special machine armor. In the anime, Keith did the whole I show my opponent I have a Sword Soul token in my deck box maneuver before swiftly setting it to the field to get Joey to attack it, thinking he's about to get a freebie, and Keith did so without tributing for it, like most cards in the Duelist Kingdom arc. So that's where we get that first effect. The second one is from the manga, where Keith just summons Zoa in face-up defense position, and I mean you can't bait an opponent if your opponent has no monsters to attack with, so letting your opponent summon one monster is the only answer. Now granted, during the mid-game this isn't really an issue. You'll find a way to get Max Metalmorph into your grave somehow, but it is still very unfortunate that this is a dangerous card to invest in during the opening turns of the duel, especially since what we're grabbing is a trap card that's going to take a turn to deploy anyway. Zoa had a chance for redemption with the rework, but sadly, it stuck to the story of its flavor text. Its full potential can only be achieved when outfitted with Metalmorph, and not a moment sooner. Red Eyes Metal Claw Dragon is a level 7 Dark Dragon monster with 2400 attack and 2000 defense, and while on the field, you can activate Metalmorph trap cards the turn they're set. You can send a face down card you control to the grave to special summon this card from your hand, and if this card is normal or special summoned and you have max Metalmorph on your field or in your grave, you can add a Metalmorph trap card from your deck or grave to your hand. The reference here is pretty simple. Joey outfits Red Eyes Black Dragon with the equipped spell Dragon Nails during the duel, which you can see in the art. This is a huge boon to the theme, letting you be far more proactive with your Metalmorphs. It even gets you a fresh one if max Metalmorph is in rotation, which means this can immediately upgrade it into a devastatingly powerful monster. Not to mention that it can help get a max Metalmorph into your grave sooner, so you can turn on all of your bonus effects. I'm certainly not gonna say no to a chance to make Fiendish Beast Zoa less bad. If anything, that pair of monsters is probably one of the funniest ways to make Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon, especially since, as an Xyz monster, it's completely incompatible with the max Metalmorph game plan. Honestly, I think they really nailed it. Okay, we've waited long enough, now it's time to talk about our Metalmorph monsters. In general, these three can't be normal summoned or set, and must first be special summoned by the effect of max Metalmorph that was activated by tributing a level 5 or higher monster of the appropriate type. Warrior for Metal Flame Swordsman, Fiend for Metal Zoa X, and Dragon for Red Eyes Black Full Metal Dragon. They also all have an effect in hand which, at the end of the effect, shovels itself back into the deck, which thankfully means they aren't bricks when you draw them. Metal Zoa and Red Eyes each reveal themselves to set a Metalmorph trap card from your deck, but Metal Flame adds any card that mentions max Metalmorph from your deck to your hand. Metal Flame Swordsman is a level 6 Fire Machine monster with 2500 attack and 1600 defense, and each time your opponent activates a card or effect, this card gains 300 attack, and burns your opponent for 500 damage when that card or effect resolves. It's good that Flame Swordsman gets the run back on this, because this is the card that bit the bullet because of the Zoa Metalmorph trick. Look, it's even got the stats it had from Salamandra when its attack got reflected. As for the effect itself, I'm not sure it has any basis in anything. It could be mirroring the Metalmorph boost, since 300 is what you gained from the original printing, and punishing game actions is kind of what this theme is all about right now. It's not going to take long for this to become incredibly beefy, but I think what's really going to get on your opponent's nerves is the perpetual burn damage. Tax effects like this don't make you a lot of friends, both on and off the dueling field, but it does give your deck a feeling of inevitability. Just don't think you can use max Metalmorph to summon this at the end of a very long chain of effects to catch your opponent for a ton of damage. While that would be funny, Metal Flame does need to see the activation to punish them. But once your opponent is down to a certain life point amount, they can't favorably activate anything, and they'll be forced to watch you take over the game with your burning passion. And the Blazing Sword. I actually think the Blazing Sword is putting in a lot more effort in this one. Metal Zoa X is a level 8 Dark Machine monster with 3000 attack and 2300 defense, and twice per turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, spell card, or spell effect as a quick effect, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls and destroy it. Ah, there it is, that classic monster and spell retaliation, and we've got a twice per turn activation on that one, so we get double the removal. Granted, we don't negate twice per turn, but decks normally need monsters to stay on board to resolve anything, and they normally need monster and spell effects to move things along, so you'll have twice as many chances to punish your opponent's choke points. And remember, while it's not printed on the card, if this is on the field because of max Metalmorph, those monster and spell effects are going to have a hard time interacting with your 3400 attack Metal Zoa X. So with a lot of common answers not cutting it, your opponent's going to have a really hard time solving for Metal Zoa X. Red Eyes Black Full Metal Dragon is a level 8 Dark Dragon monster with 3400 attack and 2400 defense, and when your opponent activates a card or effect as a quick effect, you can negate the activation, then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the original attack of an attack position monster your opponent controls. Much like how the Dragon Nails upgrades saved Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon and did a little damage to Bandit Keith in the process. So it doesn't destroy like Metal Zoa X does, but arguably does something even more valuable: win you the game. Like how Metal Flame Swordsman can put your opponent in a losing situation when their life points are low enough, if they have a monster with an original attack higher than their life points, or even just close to that, any effect they activate has a chance to just kill them. And because this doesn't destroy, that giant monster sticks around for future turns, letting you burn your opponent for even more. Unless they switch it to defense position, which, hey, seems like a win to me. Though I think we might have missed a few steps here. None of this involves exchanging anything, to say nothing of it being equivalent. Not sure this entire reference is holding up very well. Alright, that does it for the monsters, but we've got a few more spell and trap cards to cover. Incoming Machine is a normal spell card that adds a monster that mentions max Metalmorph or a Metalmorph trap card from your deck or graveyard to your hand. And if you control a Metalmorph trap card, you can banish this card from your grave, then target a defense position monster your opponent controls and change it to face-up attack position. Now, that last effect is pretty helpful for enabling Red Eye's Black Full Metal Dragon's burn effect, and can also help you get some damage in, which is a nice touch. But the primary utility is ensuring that you have the right card when you need it. Because this represents monsters that have max Metalmorph in their text, not just the trap cards, you can get Metal Illusionist to get the whole ball rolling. Not to mention Fiendish Beast Zoa when it's safe, and Metal Claw Dragon when you really need to blitz out your Metalmorph monsters. As for the reference, the composition is taken straight from the manga, while the position change is just like the stop defense used by Bandit Keith to get a solid shot through that Axe Raider. Don't worry, little guy, they're saving a nice seat for you in Rush Duels. You won't have to worry about being harassed by Metalmorph over there. Flame Coating Metalmorph is a normal trap card that tributes a face-up monster that mentions max Metalmorph to special summon a monster that can't be normal summoned or set and mentions max Metalmorph from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. Then, you can equip this card to it with the following effect. If the equipped monster would be destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can send this card to the grave instead. Now, this is a pretty cool addition to the theme. Flame Coating trades out Metalmorph's power for a broader selection. Now you don't need to tribute a dragon to get full metal or a warrior to get Metal Flame Swordsman. As long as it mentions max Metalmorph in its text, you can get any of your 3 payoffs. It even comes with some level of protection, letting you destroy it in place of the equipped monster. That being said, we do have some major drawbacks here. This version only summons from deck, and because it ignores summoning conditions, you won't be able to revive the Metalmorph monster like you could if you used max Metalmorph. And while the one-time protection is neat, it doesn't really hold a candle to the persistent monster and spell protection that max Metalmorph provides. It's an important card to have on hand for redundancy, but it's not really a replacement. No use trying to say anything better about it. I wouldn't want to sugarcoat it, or flame coat it, as the case may be. Time Engine is a normal trap card that is always treated as a Metalmorph card. If any number of monsters you control are destroyed by a battle or an opponent's card effect, target one of those monsters and special summon it. Then if you special summoned a level 5 or higher machine monster by this effect, and you have a Metalmorph trap card on your field or in your grave, except this card on the field, you can apply this effect. Destroy as many monsters your opponent controls as possible, then you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to that special summoned monster's original attack. So even if they get through all your layers of protection, you've still got a backup plan, and boy howdy is it an explosive one. Getting back full metal just to wipe out an opponent's field and burn for a huge chunk of damage is a fantastic reversal of fortune, and it's not limited to just triggering on the Metalmorph monster. If you revive any level 5 or higher machine and you have another Metalmorph trap on your field or in your graveyard, you can deal a huge amount of burn damage, and there are some big machines out there. This time around, the reference is centered largely on the card Time Machine, a pretty crummy card in print that brings back a monster that was destroyed by battle at the time it was destroyed. It's not much different in the anime, though the dramatic reveal gauge is cranked up to 11 because Joey only gets to pull this off because of his ever-faithful grave robber copying it from Bandit Keith's graveyard. So next time someone tries to tell you that Blue Eyes is the ultimate engine of destruction, you show them this card, and that should shut them up in record time. Alright, so that's all the Metalmorph cards, but what do we do with them? Well, we've got an uphill battle ahead of us, that's for sure, and it's a hell of a hill. Inherently, any good play is going to be a multi-card combo to end on a monster with some interaction, or maybe a tax monster that can be defeated by good sequencing. We're gonna need as many enablers as possible, with as many ways to get our Metalmorph monsters online as we can muster, and that's gonna require us to be a little tricky. So what can we play to help them out? Well, the first step would be to not make a whole deck revolving around them, and instead play them as special bonuses in particular decks. Adding another negate to the Dragon Link board for the cost of a high-level dragon that's used its effect already seems pretty keen, and if there's one thing I know about Unchained, it's that it loves destroying cards. Granted, it's got a few fiend locks of its own, but that's what summoning during your opponent's turn is for. But you don't just have to be on a dedicated typo list to take advantage of some of these cards. If there are any generic monsters that fit the build that are splashable, Max Metalmorph can also tag along, which has been a very roundabout way to say that the Bestials are Full Metal's best friends. They're easy to deploy, have fantastic synergy, and are high enough level to become the king of the crop. Magnamut even grabs you Metal Claw Dragon, ain't that sweet? In fact, the branded story does just support Metalmorph in general, because it's got a great way to summon Metal Illusionist. The Golden Sword Soul and Lulu Willilith both can summon a light spellcaster with an attack equal to its own defense, and last time I checked, 0 does in fact equal 0. Another deck I think has great potential for this is Labyrinth. They've got plenty of high-leveled fiends to feed to Metal Zoa, and they love normal trap cards. And because Max Metalmorph is one, lovely Labyrinth can keep setting it back to the field over and over again. So if they get rid of your Zoa, you can tribute a monster to bring it right back. And I choose my words carefully there. Any monster. At least after the initial summon. Let me fill you in on a little secret here. Remember how the type and level requirements are all part of the monster themselves, and that they just have to be properly summoned first before anything else can bring them back? This is why Time Engine allows you to bring those monsters back, and why it might be a good idea to run cards like Monster Reborn or Back to the Front to get more usage out of them. But all of this means that, because Max Metalmorph only requires you to tribute a face-up monster, and because it can summon from our graveyard, we don't actually have to tribute an appropriately typed or leveled monster to bring them back. Which gives it very fun synergy with Layer of Darkness, because that means we can use our opponent's monsters to get our Metalmorph creatures back, and it's hard to get funnier than that. The new Metalmorph cards deal with burn damage a lot, and thankfully, the Red Eyes cards have a great lineage of that already built in. We've already mentioned Flare Metal Dragon, but they also just printed Inferno Fire Blast, a spell card that's ready to just hit your opponent for 2400 damage off a single spell activation, as long as you have Red Eyes Black Dragon on the field. And that's if you're thinking small. Whatever you summon off of Red Eyes Fusion becomes Red Eyes Black Dragon, which then makes it a valid target for Inferno Fire Blast. So if you were to use it to make, say, Meteor Black Comet Dragon, it could burn your opponent for a sweet 1700 points of damage by sending another copy of Full Metal Dragon from your deck to your grave. Then Fire Blast hits your opponent for 3500 damage. That leaves your opponent with 2800 life points, but why stop there? Instead, send Red Eye's Soul to the graveyard, which will only burn your opponent for 450 damage, but then you can use its grave effect to burn your opponent for a further 3500. Combined with the Inferno Fire Blast damage, and your opponent only has 550 life points to work with. At that point, it hardly matters what Metalmorph monster you summon, your opponent's already done. As for a silly tech pick, we haven't had much Bandit Keith representation in this video, and while a majority of the monsters showcased here are Joeys, we wouldn't have it in the first place if we didn't have the Keith. So as a tribute to one of the game's biggest scumbags, I'm a big proponent of BM4 Blast Spider. Its removal effect works wonders with our Max Metalmorph infused monsters because they can't be destroyed by monster effects, thus dodging the downside of the reciprocal destruction. But the big draw here is the burn damage you can inflict when a Dark Machine monster destroys a monster with its effect. Blast Spider can pull this off by itself, but the real treat is how it augments Metal Zoa X. Now, like Full Metal Dragon, the Fiend in Steel can also slap around your opponent's life points. Just remember that even though Metal Zoa X can activate twice per turn, BM4 can only burn once per turn. And hey, while you're at it, might as well throw in Heavy Metal Raiders for another level of protection for your Metalmorph monsters. And it can sometimes get some free monsters onto the field to boot. And that's all I've got to say about Metalmorph. It's a fun little engine to tag into your deck of choice, and it's chock full of references for all of us who like seeing the underdog beat up the terminal cheaters. It's got some solid, powerful effects with enough jank to make it feel extra satisfying when you pull it off, and I look forward to seeing if this will get expanded in the future. And it'll be a treat to see what future support will do to morph its playstyle. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Metalmorph cards a great spin on an old classic, or are they still tired has-beens despite the update? And which one's your favorite? The card sucks, but I still think original Metal Zoa is just too stanced up not to love. Let me know your favorite down below, and if you haven't already, please be sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, be sure to click one of my videos in the sidebar to help me show up on your homepage, and be sure to share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you by Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout while helping out the channel. It was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, Upstairs Media, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Ancient Wizard, Andrew Newman, Battle Axe, Charlie Mercury, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Eric, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Great Big Pillock, Groog, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Marion Jamesy Picata, Mean King, Millennia Asta, Muse Clark, Neon Yaminair, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Bat Boos, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sonic 21 Blast, The Critic of Innocence, Thievery Coast, and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Ally Vatnia, Animasta, Anthorak, A Random Pup, Blade Runner 1034, Blitzwolf, Brandon Guzman, Jazz Ghost, Christopher Fuss, again, Chris B, Cool Trainer Dark, Dr. Entity RIP, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Herbal D, Julian Marquez, Kale the Dragon, Lobomaru02, Manga Pages, Natiel Lee Alexander, Not Al Gore, Obsidian, Pombo, Rhyme Kairos, Rogue Wolf, Shizuki Nijimura, Simic Toadstool, Sir Knight JCB, Sphilia, Stepfin Huntsman, The Legendary Raven, The Queen of Time, The Gene, Tiger X2476, Tristan O'Meara, and Zaldreka, as well as all the lovely Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you would check out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you want to see some of these cards in action, I've actually got a sick domain gameplay video where I go full Joey, including summoning most of the Metalmorph monsters. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.